The stars twinkled silently in the vast emptiness of space as Ambassador Alara floated before the giant viewing window. Her translucent jellyfish-like body glowed with a soft blue light that dimmed with her worried thoughts. The Confederation, council chamber behind her, buzzed with panicked voices. 50 years serving as the Lumini representative, and she had never witnessed such fear. "We must act now." Admiral Zix clicked, his insectoid mandibles snapping with each word. The Tauran officer's exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights as he gestured at the holographic display. "The Voidborn have already taken 3 systems. The Sylph homeworld fell yesterday." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Sylph were among the gentlest species in the Confederation, beings of living gas who communicated through color and light patterns. They had no concept of violence in their culture, no defenses, no chance. Ambassador Alara turned from the window. "How many survivors?" "Less than 20% of their population," Admiral Zix replied. "They had no evacuation protocols. Most didn't understand they needed to flee until it was too late." The Grand Counselor Thaliv rose from his seat at the center of the chamber. His ancient, tree-like body creaked as he moved. "Our defensive fleet?" Admiral Zix projected a new image. "Broken ships drifted in space. Destroyed in the first wave. We lost contact with Admiral Yuno 6 hours ago." Silence fell over the chamber. The Confederation had existed for over 10,000 years. In all that time they had evolved beyond warfare, beyond weapons, beyond the very concept of killing. Their limited defensive fleet existed only to help with natural disasters and evacuation efforts. "We cannot fight them," Counselor Milo whispered, his feathered wings drooping. "None of us remember how." Ambassador Alara felt a strange sensation, forming in her thoughts. An idea so unexpected, so controversial that she hesitated to speak it. But as she looked at the faces of her fellow council members, at their despair and hopelessness, she knew they had no choice. "There is one species," she said slowly, "that might help us." All eyes turned to her, the bipeds from the outer rim, the ones we denied membership to last cycle. Admiral Zix's compound eyes widened. "The humans? You can't be serious." "I am." Ilara moved toward the center of the chamber. "They asked to join our confederation and we rejected them. We called them too aggressive, too warlike." "They are," Zix clicked angrily. "Their history is full of violence. They still maintain military forces. Their entertainment glorifies combat." "Exactly," Ilara replied. "They know how to fight." The council chamber erupted in voices. Some outraged, some curious, some desperate enough to consider any option. Grand Counselor Thaliv raised his branches for silence. "Ambassador Alara, you propose we ask these humans to fight for us? To kill for us?" "I propose we ask them to help us," she corrected. "The Voidborn will reach their sector eventually. Perhaps they will see the logic in stopping this threat before it reaches their worlds." Captain Frank Carter stood by the communication array on Europa Station, reading the message for the 5th time. His dark hair needed a trim, and stubble covered his jaw after 3 days of monitoring communications. The blue light of Jupiter shone through the station's dome, casting everything in an ethereal glow. "They're actually asking for our help?" Lisa Bennett, his communications officer, looked over his shoulder. Her red hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her freckled face showing disbelief. "After rejecting our membership application, because we're too violent," Frank said with a dry laugh. "Now they need that violence." "What do we do, Captain?" Frank stared at the message again. The Galactic Confederation, with its hundreds of peaceful species, was facing extinction. They had denied Earth membership because humanity hadn't evolved beyond their aggressive tendencies. Now those same tendencies might be their only salvation. "Contact Earth. Emergency channel to the UNSC headquarters. They need to see this immediately." 12. Hours later, Frank stood before a screen showing General Alice Montgomery. Her steel-gray hair was cut short, and her uniform bore the insignia of the United Nations Space Command. Behind her sat the 20 representatives of Earth's Security Council. "The transmission is verified?" General Montgomery asked. "Yes, General." Ambassador Alara sent it directly from the Confederation Council chambers. The Voidborn, whoever they are, have already destroyed multiple worlds. The Confederation has no real military to speak of. And they want our help? A council member asked with raised eyebrows. They're desperate, Frank replied. Their entire society evolved to eliminate violence. They don't know how to fight back. General Montgomery's eyes narrowed in thought. What's your assessment, Captain Carter? Frank straightened his shoulders. The Confederation spans thousands of systems. If this hostile species conquers them, humanity will eventually face them alone. Better to fight alongside potential allies than wait for the threat to reach our doorstep. The general nodded slowly. Dr. Novak, your thoughts? The xenobiologist stood up from his seat at the council table. His round glasses reflected the light as he brought up data on the main screen. Based on the information Captain Carter sent, the Voidborn appear to be a hive mind species. They don't negotiate or communicate, they simply consume and expand. If their pattern continues, they would reach our solar system within 15 years. Lieutenant Jack Hudson spoke next. The young tactical officer pointed to a star chart. If we mobilize now, we can meet them at these coordinates. Fight them, on Confederation territory rather than near Earth. And what would that take? Asked General Montgomery. Everything, Hudson replied simply. Every ship we have, and even then. Chief Engineer Maria Gonzalez cleared her throat. All eyes turned to the small woman with determined eyes. General, this might be the moment to reveal Project Defender. Murmurs spread through the council. Project Defender was classified at the highest level. General Montgomery considered for a long moment before nodding. Show them. Maria brought up new schematics on the screen. Advanced warships unlike anything humanity had built before. We've been developing these vessels in secret for the past 5 years, she explained. Designed to defend Earth against any potential cosmic threat. They're faster and more powerful than anything in our current fleet. How many are operational? Frank asked through the video link. 15, Maria replied, with another 30 nearly complete. General Montgomery stood, her decision made. Captain Carter, send word to the Confederation. Tell them humanity accepts their call for aid. We will dispatch a fleet to their coordinates within 14 days. Frank nodded, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. Yes, General. And Captain, Montgomery added. Remind them that they asked for us exactly as we are. They wanted humanity's help. They're going to get all of us. Back in the Confederation Council, Ambassador Alara received the human response. Her bioluminescent body pulsed with surprise as she read it to the gathered representatives. They're sending a fleet already? Admiral Zix clicked in disbelief. How is that possible? They never disarmed, Ilara reminded him. They maintained their warships, their weapons, their soldiers. How many ships? Asked Councillor Thelev. Ilara's light dimmed slightly. 500. Shocked silence filled the chamber. 500 warships, Zix finally managed. Their entire species has less than 20 worlds and they have 500 warships ready to deploy. Now you understand, Ilara said quietly, why I believed they could help us, and perhaps also why we feared them. Out in the darkness of space, the Voidborn ships moved through the ruins of another conquered world. They did not celebrate their victory. They simply consumed and continued forward, an unstoppable wave of destruction. But from the other direction, something was coming. Something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that evolved not away from violence, but through it. Creatures who had turned war into an art form, then a science, then a last resort they never quite abandoned. The most dangerous beings in the galaxy were coming. And for once, that would be a good thing. The massive hangar of Earth's orbital shipyard buzzed with activity. Workers in spacesuits moved between the enormous warships, making final preparations. The vessels gleamed under the harsh lights, their hulls marked with the symbol of the United Nations Space Command, Earth surrounded by stars with a shield. General Alice Montgomery watched from an observation deck, her hands clasped behind her back. Her uniform was crisp, her posture perfect, but worry lines creased her forehead. A lifetime in military service had not prepared her for sending Earth's entire defense fleet to fight an unknown enemy in distant space. "Are we making a mistake?" she asked quietly. Dr. Peter Novak stood beside her, his glasses reflecting the busy scene below. "The data doesn't lie, General. The Voidborn will reach our system eventually. Better to face them with allies, even reluctant ones." "If you can call the Confederation allies," Lieutenant Jack Hudson said as he approached with a tablet in hand. The young officer's uniform was slightly rumpled from too many hours without sleep. "They've spent thousands of years pretending warfare doesn't exist. Now they expect us to save them. They're paying a heavy price for that delusion," General Montgomery replied. She turned to Hudson. "Status report?" Hudson handed her the tablet. "The fleet is at 97% readiness. Chief Engineer Gonzalez is making final adjustments to the new Defender-class vessels." As if summoned by her name, Maria Gonzalez entered the observation deck. Grease stained her hands and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She had not slept in 3 days. "The new ships are ready," she announced. "All 15 Defender-class vessels passed their final tests." "General." Montgomery nodded approvingly. "You've done the impossible, Chief. These ships weren't supposed to be ready for another 6 months. Maria's tired face broke into a small smile. "My teams haven't stopped working since we received the distress call. We know what's at stake." Dr. Novak pointed to a section of the tablet. "The Confederation sent more data on the Voidborn. They appear to be a collective organism that spreads through conquering new territories and absorbing resources." "Like a virus," Hudson said. "Or a cancer," Maria added quietly. General Montgomery's face hardened. "Either way, we're the treatment." She handed the tablet back to Hudson. "Begin final boarding procedures. The fleet leaves in 6 hours." Aboard the UNS Defiant, Commander Daniel Wright walked through the gleaming corridors of Earth's newest and most powerful warship. At 45, his face showed the experience of 2 decades in space. A thin scar ran from his right temple to his jaw, a reminder of a pirate encounter in the asteroid belt years ago. He entered the bridge where his crew worked at their stations, preparing for departure. The ship hummed with power and purpose. "Commander, on deck," called the officer at the door. Everyone stood at attention. "At ease," Daniel said, making his way to the captain's chair. "Status report." Lieutenant Olivia Chen turned from her communications station. Her dark eyes were sharp and focused. "All departments report ready, sir. We're fully stocked and armed. The crew is at 100%. "Good." Daniel settled into his chair and studied the main display showing the gathered fleet. 500 warships of various sizes, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. And somehow he had been chosen to lead it. "Lieutenant Chen, open a channel to all ships." "Channel open, sir." Daniel took a deep breath. "This is Commander Wright. In 1 hour, we depart on the most important mission in human history. 500 ships, 50,000 crew members, traveling beyond our solar system to face an enemy that threatens not just humanity but all peaceful life in our galaxy." He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew. "The Confederation rejected us because they feared our capacity for violence. Now they need that very capacity to survive. We go to fight not just for humanity's future, but to prove what kind of species we truly are. We are not mindless warriors. We are protectors, defenders. Today, we show the galaxy that humans fight hardest when fighting for others." He nodded to Chen to close the channel, then turned to his navigator. "Set course for the rendezvous coordinates." Across the fleet, final preparations were underway. In the Marine barracks of the UNS Valiant, Sergeant Kevin Miller supervised as his troops checked their weapons and armor. The Special Forces unit had trained together for years, but never expected their first real combat would be against an alien threat. "Listen up," Kevin called to his squad. His voice was rough from years of barking orders. "We don't know much about these Voidborn, except that they've been tearing through the Confederation like wet paper. These aliens we're going to meet have never fought a war before. They don't understand combat. Most of them don't even understand the concept of weapons." He picked up his rifle, checking the sights with practiced hands. "That means 2 jobs for us. First, kill the enemy. Second, protect the innocent. Both are equally important. We're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. His squad nodded solemnly. On their shoulders, they wore the patch of Earth's Marine Special Forces, a shield with a sword behind it. In her quarters aboard the medical ship UNS Mercy, Dr. Emma Wilson reviewed the limited biological data on the Voidborn. The Confederation sensors had captured some information, but it was frustratingly incomplete. As the fleet's leading xenobiologist, she needed to understand their enemy to find weaknesses. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. President Laura Hayes stepped into the room. The leader of Earth's government was not supposed to be on this mission, but she had insisted on joining to handle diplomatic relations with the Confederation. "Dr. Wilson," the president said with a tired smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Emma stood quickly. "Madam President, not at all. I was just reviewing our limited data on the Voidborn." President Hayes nodded toward the screens. "Any insights?" "Some," Emma replied. "They appear to share a hive mind of sorts. Each individual is connected to the collective. That might be a vulnerability we can exploit." "Good," the president said. "We need every advantage." She paused, looking out the small window at the fleet gathered beyond. History will remember this moment. The day humanity ventured into the stars not to conquer but to protect. 6 hours later, the massive fleet moved into position. One by one, the ships activated their faster-than-light drives, disappearing into the darkness of space with brilliant flashes of blue light. On the Confederation border outpost, the alien, observers watched their long-range sensors with disbelief. "They're actually coming," Ambassador Alara said, her luminescent body pulsing with hope. 500 warships. Admiral Zix clicked his mandibles nervously. "We may have invited a different kind of monster to fight our current one." Ilara turned to the insectoid admiral. "Perhaps, but these monsters answered when we called for help." The outpost fell silent as the sensors showed the first human ships arriving at the edge of their space. The most formidable beings in the galaxy had arrived. Now they would see if that was a blessing or simply a different kind of curse. In the darkness beyond, the Voidborn continued their relentless advance, unaware that they were about to encounter something they had never faced before, a species that had been forged in the fires of conflict, tempered by thousands of years of warfare and driven by the unshakable will to protect. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The massive human warship UNS Defiant hung in space like a predator, its dark hull marked with weapons arrays that made Ambassador Alara's luminescent body pulse with anxiety. Through the observation window of the Confederation outpost, she watched as smaller human vessels moved in perfect formation around their flagship. "They have more weapons on a single ship than our entire defense fleet had," Admiral Zix clicked, his compound eyes focusing and refocusing on the human armada. "Commander." Daniel Wright stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking at the strange structure that served as the Confederation's border outpost. It reminded him of a giant coral formation, beautiful but seemingly fragile. "Lieutenant Chen, status of our meeting with the Confederation representatives?" Olivia Chen brushed a strand of dark hair from her face as she checked her console. "They've invited a delegation to board their station in 1 hour, sir. Maximum of 5 representatives." Daniel nodded. "Prepare a shuttle. Inform President Hayes, Dr. Wilson, and Sergeant Miller they'll be joining us." Within an hour, the human shuttle docked with the alien station. The airlock cycled, and the 5 humans stepped into a corridor that seemed to be made of living crystal. President Laura Hayes led the group, her formal suit a stark contrast to Commander Wright's military uniform and Sergeant Miller's combat gear. They were greeted by a delegation of aliens more diverse than any human had ever seen. Ambassador Alara floated forward, her jellyfish-like body glowing with blue and green patterns. "Welcome to Confederation space," she said, her voice somehow reaching the humans' minds directly. "I am Ambassador Ilara of the Lumini. This is Admiral Zix of the Tauran Defense Force." The insectoid admiral clicked his mandibles in what might have been a greeting. His carapace gleamed under the station's soft light. President Hayes stepped forward with practiced diplomatic poise. On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I thank you for your welcome. I am President Laura Hayes. This is Commander Daniel Wright, our military leader, Dr. Emma Wilson, our chief xenobiologist, Lieutenant Olivia Chen, our communications specialist, and Sergeant Kevin Miller, who leads our special forces. Ambassador. Alara's light dimmed slightly when President Hayes mentioned their military titles. Please follow us to the council chamber. There is much to discuss. The council chamber was a large circular room with a holographic display in the center. Already, gathered were representatives from a dozen alien species. Some looked almost human, while others defied easy description. Beings of gas, crystalline entities that chimed when they moved, and creatures that seemed made of living shadow. As the humans entered, a hush fell over the room. Many of the aliens had never seen humans before. A small cloud-like being drifted forward, its gaseous body shifting between pastel colors. Admiral Zix introduced it. This is Zal, one of the few survivors from the Sylph homeworld. Zal's form pulsed with deep, red tones. My world is gone. My people scattered. The Voidborn came without warning. We had no defense. Commander Wright stepped closer to the holographic display. Show me. Admiral Zix activated the display, and images appeared. A beautiful world of floating cities and crystal forests reduced to ash and ruin. Then came footage of the attackers. Black ships shaped like jagged spears swarming like insects around planetary defenses that fell within minutes. The Voidborn themselves? Daniel asked. The display changed to show dark, multi-limbed creatures, moving with unnatural coordination. Their bodies seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dr. Wilson moved closer, studying the images with scientific intensity. They move as one, she noted, like a single organism controlling multiple bodies. Yes, Zal's colors shifted to a sad blue. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply take. Lieutenant Chen had been quiet, but now she spoke. Up. May I see your recordings of their communications? Even if you couldn't understand them, they must use some form of signaling. Admiral Zix seemed surprised. Yes, we recorded electromagnetic patterns from their fleet, but we found no meaning in them. While Chen reviewed the data, Commander Wright turned to the gathered aliens. I need to be direct. Your people have no experience with warfare. How many of you are willing to fight alongside us? The chamber fell silent. The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. Ambassador Alara's glow dimmed further. Commander, you must understand. Most Confederation species have evolved beyond violence. The concept of willingly engaging in combat is alien to us. Sergeant Miller couldn't hide his frustration. So you called us here to fight for you, not with you? We called you because we have no other choice. Admiral Zix clicked sharply. We cannot become what we are not. The tension in the room grew until President Hayes raised her hand. We didn't come here to judge your evolutionary path. We came to help. If you cannot fight, perhaps you can assist in other ways. Intelligence, resources, medical aid. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Chen had been studying the Voidborn communication patterns. Commander, she called suddenly, I think I've found something. All eyes turned to her. These aren't random patterns. They're coordinated pulses, quantum-entangled signals. She pointed to specific points in the data. See how they align perfectly across vast distances? They're not communicating. They're synchronizing. Dr. Wilson moved to Chen's side. A hive mind, she said with growing excitement, but one that needs constant reinforcement to maintain control over distant units. Commander Wright understood, immediately. If we disrupt those signals, we might break their coordination, Chen finished. Across the room, a new alien entered, a tall, mantis-like being with 4 arms. You believe you can defeat them? It asked in a melodious voice. President. Hayes turned. And you are? I am Grand Counselor Thaliv, leader of the Confederation Council. Daniel stepped forward. Grand Counselor. We don't just believe we can defeat them, we will defeat them. But we need information, resources, and cooperation. Theleave studied the humans with multifaceted eyes. You speak with great certainty, Commander Wright. Because humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, Daniel replied. It's not something we're proud of, but it's given us skills your people never developed. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his combat gear making some of the aliens flinch. I can train volunteers in basic defense, not to make them into soldiers, but to help them survive if the Voidborn break through our lines. To everyone's surprise, Zale's gaseous form drifted toward Miller. I will learn, the sylph said, colors shifting to a determined orange. My people are scattered across refugee camps. Many will follow if I lead. One by one, a few other aliens came forward. Not many, but enough to start. Miller nodded respectfully to each volunteer. Commander Wright turned back to the holographic display, studying the Voidborn fleet movements. Their pattern is predictable. They move like a flood, not like strategists. Because they've never faced real resistance, President Hayes suggested. Exactly. Daniel began outlining a plan, moving his hands through the holographic display to show fleet positions. We don't try to hold territory initially. We strike hard at their supply lines, disrupt their communication patterns, and test their response. Admiral Zix watched with growing interest. You would not engage their main fleet directly? Not until we understand them better, Daniel replied. In warfare, knowledge is as important as firepower. As the planning session continued, a Confederation sensor operator rushed into the chamber. Voidborn scout ship detected on approach to this station. The aliens froze in fear, but the humans sprang into action. Commander Wright opened his communication channel. Defiant, we have enemy contact. Prepare to engage but hold fire until my command. Lieutenant Chen studied the incoming data. It appears to be a single reconnaissance vessel. They don't know we're here yet. Daniel made a quick decision. Let's keep it that way. Power down the station. No signals, no lights. Let them think it's abandoned. The station quickly went dark, leaving only emergency lighting. Through observation windows, they watched as a black, spike-shaped vessel slowly moved past the station, scanning but not attacking. They're transmitting, Chen whispered, monitoring the signals. Sending data back to their fleet. Can we intercept the transmission? Daniel asked. Better, Chen replied with a slight smile. We can track it to its destination. Sergeant Miller moved silently to the window, watching the enemy ship with practiced eyes. First rule of war: know where your enemy is hiding. The Voidborn ship completed its scan and began to move away. The assembled aliens breathed a collective sigh of relief, but Commander Wright's expression remained grim. They'll know we're here soon enough, he said quietly. The real test is about to begin. As if in response to his words, the Voidborn ship suddenly changed course, turning back toward the station. It had detected something. They've seen the fleet, Chen said urgently. From the darkness of space, a single beam of energy lanced out from the human flagship. It struck the Voidborn vessel with perfect precision. The black ship shattered into fragments, the explosion silent in the vacuum of space. The aliens watched in shock at how quickly and efficiently the humans had destroyed their enemy. For the first time, they understood what they had called to: their aid. The most formidable beings had indeed arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral William Grant stood before the massive tactical display aboard his command ship, the UNS Everest. His weathered face, lined with years of command decisions, remained calm as he studied the positions of the human fleet. At 62, he was the most experienced military leader humanity had to offer, called from retirement for this mission. Status report, he ordered, his deep voice carrying across the bridge. A young officer stepped forward. Sir, all battle groups are in position. Commander Wright reports that the Voidborn have not yet detected our main force. Admiral Grant nodded. Good. And Captain Rodriguez? Her stealth team has reached the target system. They await your orders. 3 days had passed since the destruction of the Voidborn scout ship. The human fleet had split into multiple battle groups, each with a specific mission. While Commander Wright's forces drew attention at the border, other ships had slipped, deeper into Confederation space. Captain Sofia Rodriguez crouched in the shadow of a massive asteroid, her stealth vessel powered down to avoid detection. Through the viewport she could see the Voidborn supply depot, a sprawling structure built from the remains of a conquered Confederation outpost. Her ship, the UNS Shadow Fox, was specially designed for covert operations. Its hull absorbed sensor scans rather than reflecting them. "All teams ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that sound couldn't travel in space. Her executive officer nodded. "Yes, Captain. Demolition charges are prepared. Team Alpha is in position to board the command node." Sophia checked her tactical display one last time. "Begin Operation Wildfire." Across the asteroid field, 5 other stealth ships activated their engines simultaneously. They approached the Voidborn depot from different angles, remaining in the sensor shadows of larger asteroids. Aboard the UNS Mercy, Chief Medical Officer Nathan Jones worked tirelessly in his laboratory. The captured tissue samples from the destroyed Voidborn scout had provided valuable information. His team of scientists studied the alien biology with growing excitement. "Look at this," he said to Dr. Emma Wilson, who had joined his research team. He pointed to a microscopic image on his screen. "Their cellular structure changes when exposed to copper." Emma leaned closer. "It's breaking down the connections between cells." "Exactly," Nathan replied. "Copper is toxic to them, and it's one of the most common elements on Earth." Back at the Confederation outpost, Sergeant Kevin Miller watched as Zal and 24 other aliens attempted to assemble standard-issue human defensive barriers. The Sylph's gaseous body struggled to manipulate the physical components while other aliens had too many limbs or not enough strength. "Don't worry about getting it perfect," Kevin said. His normally gruff voice softened somewhat. "Just focus on creating any kind of cover you can use when under fire." A crystalline being chimed in confusion. "But why not simply surrender if attacked? Would that not prevent harm?" Kevin shook his head. "The Voidborn don't take prisoners. They consume resources, including living beings. You need to defend yourselves to survive." Nearby, Lieutenant Olivia Chen worked with Admiral Zix and a group of Confederation communication specialists. They had been developing a method to disrupt the Voidborn synchronization signals. "The quantum entanglement pattern repeats every 12.7 seconds, Olivia explained, pointing to her data. "If we broadcast this counter-frequency at precisely the right moment, we can break their coordination temporarily." Admiral Zix clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "And you believe this will confuse them?" "More than confuse them," Olivia replied. "Imagine if your nervous system suddenly stopped sending signals to half your body. That's what we're trying to do to their collective." In the shadows of the detention area, Dr. Wilson and Commander Wright stood before a containment field. Inside floated a small piece of the destroyed Voidborn scout ship, a fragment that still pulsed with dark energy. "It's still alive," Emma said, monitoring the readings on her tablet. "Or at least part of the collective consciousness remains active in it." Daniel studied the black, shifting mass with narrow eyes. "Can it communicate?" "I think so," Emma replied. "But I don't know how to interpret its responses." The fragment suddenly pulsed more rapidly, and both humans stepped back instinctively. "It reacts to our presence," Emma noted. "It knows we're here." Daniel's expression hardened. "Then it knows we're coming for the rest of them too." Aboard the UNS Everest, Admiral Grant received the signal from Captain Rodriguez. Her stealth operation had succeeded. The Voidborn supply depot was destroyed, along with 30 enemy vessels caught in the explosion. "Well done, Captain," Grant said over the secure channel. "Proceed to Phase 2. Across 3 star systems, similar operations were underway. The human fleet wasn't attempting to hold territory or engage in traditional battles. Instead, they struck at key infrastructure, destroyed supply lines, and vanished before the Voidborn could respond. On the main tactical display, Grant watched as red indicators representing void-born forces began to move in confused patterns. For the first time, they faced an enemy who understood warfare as an art form. "Sir," his communications officer called. "We're receiving a transmission from Commander Wright. The void-born are changing their formation. They're abandoning 3 recently conquered systems to consolidate their forces." Grant allowed himself a small smile. "They're learning. Good. Now they'll make mistakes." In the Confederation Council chamber, President Hayes addressed the gathered representatives. Behind her, a holographic display showed the current state of the conflict. "For the first time, the void-born advance has been halted," she announced. "But this is only the beginning. We've forced them to react to us, but they're adaptable. They'll develop new strategies." Grand Counselor Thaliv stepped forward. "Your methods are disturbing to many of us, President Hayes. The level of violence your forces employ is necessary," Laura finished firmly. "We understand your discomfort, Counselor. Violence is not something we enjoy, but against an enemy that only understands force, it is the only language we can speak." Ambassador Alara floated closer, her luminescence pulsing gently. "Some of my people have been studying your history, President Hayes. Your species has fought countless wars among yourselves." Laura nodded solemnly. "Yes, it's a painful truth about humanity. We've spent thousands of years fighting each other, but in doing so, we learned how to end wars as well as how to wage them." On the far side of Confederation space, Captain Rodriguez's stealth team infiltrated an abandoned monitoring station. The Voidborn had passed through this system but left no permanent presence. The station's data cores might contain valuable intelligence. "Look at this," her science officer said, pointing to a screen. Before they went offline, the station recorded the Voidborn communication patterns across this entire sector. Sophia studied the display. "Can you trace them back to their source?" The officer worked quickly. "Yes. All signals originate from a single point." He highlighted a star system on the map. "Here. This must be where their central intelligence is located." Sophia's eyes widened. "The Hive Mind Control Center." She opened a secure channel immediately. "Admiral Grant, we found it. The heart of the Voidborn Collective." Back on the Defiant, Commander Wright received the information from Admiral Grant. He turned to Lieutenant Chen. "How soon can your disruption signal be ready?" "The prototype works in limited range," Olivia replied. "But to affect their entire fleet, we'd need to broadcast from multiple points simultaneously, precisely coordinated." Daniel nodded. "Begin preparations. If we can strike at their central intelligence while disrupting their communication network, we could break the hive." "Mind entirely," Olivia finished. As they discussed the plan, an alert sounded. The Voidborn had launched a massive counterattack against the human forces in the Sylph system. Hundreds of black ships poured from hyperspace, surrounding the human battle group stationed there. "They're learning," Daniel said grimly. "They've identified our command structure and are targeting it specifically." He opened a channel to Admiral Grant. "Sir, the Voidborn have changed tactics. They're concentrating their forces for decisive strikes rather than spreading out." "They're adapting," Grant replied, "which means we've hurt them enough to force a change. Hold your position, Commander. Help is on the way." As the largest battle of the war began, the Confederation observers watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. For species that had known only peace for thousands of years, the scale of violence was almost incomprehensible. Yet in the face of that violence, hope began to grow. For the first time since the Voidborn appeared, the Confederation wasn't just running and hiding, they were fighting back. And with humanity leading the way, they might actually win. The bridge of the UNS Defiant shook as another Voidborn energy blast struck the shields. Commander Daniel Wright gripped his chair, watching as the tactical display showed his fleet surrounded by enemy vessels. The battle had raged for 6 hours, with no sign of stopping. "Shield status," he demanded. "Holding at 30%, sir," his operations officer replied. Sweat beaded on the young man's forehead. Lieutenant Olivia Chen looked up from her communications station. "Commander, the disruption signal is ready. All ships are in position to broadcast simultaneously." Daniel nodded. Send the activation code to Admiral Grant. The massive battle was just a diversion. While the Voidborn concentrated their forces on the human fleet at the border, a small strike team led by Major Ryan Clark had infiltrated the system containing the Voidborn Central Intelligence. The coordinates Captain Rodriguez had discovered had led them to an artificial structure, unlike anything seen before, a massive black sphere suspended in space, pulsing with dark energy. Major Clark's team moved through the empty corridors of their stealth vessel, checking weapons and equipment one final time. His face showed calm determination as he addressed his soldiers. "Remember your training," he said. "We go in fast, set the charges, and get out. The EMP devices will disrupt their internal systems long enough for us to plant the copper core bombs." At his side, Dr. Emma Wilson made final adjustments to a specialized communication device. "This should allow me to establish contact with the central mind, if there is one. We need to understand what we're facing." Clark checked his helmet seal. "Just remember, Doctor, understanding comes second to survival." Aboard the UNS Everest, Admiral Grant received the message from Commander Wright. All pieces were in place. He opened a channel to every ship in the human fleet. "All vessels, this is Admiral Grant. Operation Kingslayer begins now. May God have mercy on our souls, because we will show none to our enemy." Across the battlefield, human ships suddenly changed formation. As the Voidborn moved to compensate, every human vessel simultaneously activated their disruption signals. The quantum frequencies flooded space, scrambling the hive mind's coordination patterns. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Voidborn ships began moving erratically, some crashing into each other, others firing weapons at random. The collective intelligence that guided them had been temporarily blinded. "It's working!" Lieutenant Chen exclaimed. "Their coordination is breaking down." Daniel leaned forward in his chair. "All ships press the advantage. Focus fire on their command vessels." The human fleet moved with practiced precision, targeting the larger Voidborn ships that seemed to serve as relay points for the hive mind's signals. One by one, the black vessels exploded in silent bursts of energy. Inside the Voidborn Central Intelligence structure, Major Clark's team moved through corridors that seemed to shift and pulse with living energy. The air itself felt wrong, as if it resisted their presence. "Charges set in sectors 1 through 3, reported a soldier through the comm system. 4 through 6 are armed and ready," confirmed another. Clark checked his tactical display. 7 minutes until detonation. Moved to the extraction point. Dr. Wilson had split from the main group, following her scanner readings to what appeared to be the center of the structure. The corridor opened into a vast chamber dominated by a pulsing black mass that seemed to absorb all light around it. "I've found it," she whispered into her comm. "The central node." She activated her communication device, sending carefully calculated signals toward the mass. To her surprise, it responded immediately. Her device translated the alien thoughts into words she could understand. "You are not like the others," the mass communicated. "You resist. You fight." "Why?" Emma steadied herself. "You attacked peaceful worlds. You consumed innocent lives. We expand. We grow. It is our nature." "And it is our nature to protect," Emma replied. "To defend those who cannot defend themselves." The mass pulsed faster. "Your species is different, violent, dangerous. We have never encountered your kind before. We are human," Emma said simply, "and we will not allow you to continue destroying worlds." The mass seemed to consider this. "Humans. You are few, yet you challenge us. Interesting. Perhaps we should study you before we consume your worlds." "That's not going to happen," Emma said, backing away slowly. "We're ending this today." Across the structure, the extraction alarm sounded. Major Clark's voice came urgently through her comm. "Dr. Wilson, we need to leave now. Charges detonate." "In 3 minutes!" Emma turned and ran, the corridor seeming to constrict around her as if the structure itself was trying to trap her. Behind her, the black mass began to pulse erratically, as if finally understanding the danger. On the battlefield, the human ships pressed their advantage. With the void-borne coordination disrupted, the alien vessels fell one by one to precision strikes. Commander Wright watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet began to break apart. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen called, "we're receiving a signal from Major Clark's team. They've planted the charges and are extracting now." Daniel nodded. "All ships, prepare for Phase 3. Deploy the copper warheads." Across the human fleet, specialized missiles launched toward the remaining void-borne vessels. Each contained a payload of refined copper particles designed to penetrate the alien hulls and poison them from within. In the Confederation Council chamber, the alien representatives watched the battle unfold on their displays. Many had covered their sensory organs, unable to witness the violence. But Ambassador Alara and Admiral Zix remained, their attention fixed on the humans' strategy. "They fight with a precision I never imagined possible," Zix clicked. Violence turned into an art form. Ilara's luminescence dimmed, and yet they offered the Voidborn a chance to retreat. They tried to communicate first. That speaks to something beyond mere violence. In the Voidborn Central System, Major Clark's team raced back to their ship. Dr. Wilson was the last to board, barely making it up the ramp before it closed. The stealth vessel quickly pulled away from the massive structure, accelerating to safe distance. "Detonation in 10 seconds. The pilot announced. The team braced themselves as the countdown reached 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a blinding flash erupted from the structure. The copper core bombs detonated, sending poisonous metal particles throughout the void-borne central intelligence. Simultaneously, EMP charges disrupted the quantum communication network. The black sphere began to break apart, cracks of light spreading across its surface. Then, it imploded in a spectacular collapse, sending a shockwave through space that rocked the escaping vessel. Across the galaxy, every void-borne ship and structure reacted immediately. Some simply went dormant, while others began to disintegrate. The hive mind that controlled them had been severed. Without its guidance, the individual units could not function. On the bridge of the Defiant, Commander Wright watched as enemy ships stopped firing and drifted aimlessly in space. Lieutenant Chen looked up from her station, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, the Voidborne fleet is shutting down. All across Confederation space, their ships are going dormant." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "Send word to Admiral Grant. Operation Kingslayer was a success." 2 weeks later, President Laura Hayes stood before the Confederation Council. The chamber was more crowded than ever, with representatives from every species in attendance. Many had traveled from refugee camps, eager to hear if they could return to their worlds. "The war is over," President Hayes announced. "The Voidborne threat has been neutralized. Their central intelligence has been destroyed and their forces have been rendered harmless." Murmurs of relief and joy spread through the chamber. Species that had no concept of celebration before now learned what it meant to rejoice. Grand Counselor Thaleave stepped forward. "On behalf of all Confederation species, we extend our deepest gratitude to humanity. You answered our plea when we had no hope left." President Hayes nodded graciously. "We did what any sentient being should do when others are in danger. We helped. And yet," Ambassador Alara noted, her light pulsing gently, "few species would have had both the ability and the will to fight as you did." President Hayes looked across the chamber at the diverse alien faces. "Perhaps that is why our paths crossed. Your civilization evolved toward peace and cooperation. Ours evolved through conflict and hardship. Together we bring balance to each other." Grand Counselor Thaleave raised his branch-like arms. "The Confederation officially extends an invitation to Earth and all human colonies to join as full members. But more than that, we ask that humanity consider a special role within our community, as protectors." President Hayes smiled. "We would be honored, and in return, perhaps your people can teach us more about peace." As the formalities concluded, humans and aliens began to mingle, sharing stories and making connections that would have seemed impossible just months before. Sergeant Miller demonstrated combat stances to curious alien younglings. Lieutenant Chen discussed communication theory with Confederation scientists. Dr. Wilson exchanged biological research with alien medical experts. The desperate plea for help had brought the most formidable beings in the galaxy to fight a war. But in victory, they found something even more valuable: a new purpose and a new home among the stars.